Okay, so we're in Shared Delusion Sprint 2. This is the review session. Here's kind of the high-level overview. This sprint spanned 3 weeks, so it started on the 5th of June and lasted till today. Completed story points, we're currently at 116 with 156 remaining story points. That isn't a scary ratio, so folks can, as they're going through the stories, help us better understand maybe some of the challenges, and then we can see how we can address those. Okay, let's start with data model.
Okay, so the first one was generalizing the model policy framework to extend to services. That was started last sprint and finished this sprint. Next was to move tenant with container out of the core attic and into the core model policy so it can be used by the model policy framework. That model policy is the basis for the ones that example service and VSG use. The next task was to move out the VOLT, VSG, and example service model policies out of the core and into their own repositories where they can run in the model policy framework. I decided to defer the vRouter service because I think we need to look into some refactoring of vRouter, and I didn't want to do a bunch of policy work there that will be quickly abandoned. So deferring that until we've had a chance to look into service and tenant refactoring next sprint, as well as maybe doing the synchronizer implementation survey whenever that happens. Then we had 2 bugs here, which was the ORM didn't supporting or setting foreign keys to none. That was in support of model policy, so fix that. And then there was an issue where sometimes controller network objects were not created. This would manifest as example service either not coming up right or coming up without its networks or not coming up at all. I don't recall exactly what the symptom was there, but it was example service related. And we think we have that fixed, though I never did actually reproduce the problem to be able to clarify that I fixed it. My retrospective comment was I spent some time working on the OPNFV demo, as well as some of these bugs that were added during the sprint.
But you got all of the things done, so that's pretty amazing.
So that retrospective comment kind of goes with my other couple of slides. I have a maintenance slide and an open cloud slide that stuff didn't get done on. So
okay, yeah.
For example, we didn't start CDN work at all, and that was expected to take half the sprint. And that's it for this slide.
Okay, thanks, Scott. More. Is that enough?
Yeah, so I'm going to start with some of the bug fixes that got added in the release. So we updated Core 3.0 to use the release version of the XProto parser and processor, because we want to move ahead with development in that. We don't want development to affect the 3.0 branch. In doing that, I guess I came upon an API sanity check breakage. So it was broken for 3.0. And in looking into that, I guess I discovered an XOS base build failure, so that took a little bit of time. And later on, it turned out that the mock RCode profile was broken because of some reason. So these things needed fixing. Zach pretty much figured out how to fix the 4th one. And I just did the implementation bit. Then, as part of the general data model cleanups, we had decided to perhaps include the data model cleanups in a minor release of 3.0, so 3.0.1, but we were unable to. I guess we recently decided against that because it was too much of the quantum of work was too big. And so I did a pointed cleanup so that service developers, such as Omar, who's been porting 2.0 services to 3.0, did not have to worry about antics, the code that we couldn't get cleaned up in the previous release. And so to clean up that process, it's cleaned up now. And also that's now documented in the service development tutorial. And there's now an exploiter target that automatically generates the stuff that you begin with. These have been cherry picked to 3.0. And there was the auto-generating the model defs API, which was manually generated, manually constructed previously. So that's now auto-generated and fed to the UI. Merging the API generator and model defs API. This was mainly the API was already being generated as part of work that got done in the previous sprint. This was really tying that into the build process and into the make files, and also writing a wrapper for the model devs part to suck in the generated API and to provide it on the gRPC side. So I've moved on to the next page. Again, as part of the general cleanup, there was we have database constraints which were manually handcrafted, which are now auto-generated. This also included the implementation of a general handling of sets of fields. So right now we just use it to generate these database constraints. In the future we could use it for other stuff. And also there was this bug which interacted with many of these features, which required us to start supporting packaging and the namespacing of models. So what happens is that because now services are providing us with data model definitions, we don't want the elements of the services to conflict with each other. So if models have the same names, or if there are options included with services, we want to differentiate between options of one service from options of another. So now these are prefixed by the name of the package, the name of the app in which the service is. There's also, so the first part of the data model cleanup was general cleanup. The second part is model and security policies. So the Xproto processor is now modified to support policies, and it's factored into the generative tool chain to support that as well. And there's a Google Docs file with the design notes that various people have been commenting on, and having conversations with various people as well. What's in flight is the second half of this work, the model security policy stuff, which involves extending the Django runtime to support these policies in a generic way. Again, all that is handcrafted, specific code written for specific models like slices and sites and so on. So we want to auto-generate all that, and so we want to auto-generate security policy enforcements. What's not started is data validation cleanup, which was along the same lines. It will probably end up using some of this policy work. Something I need to coordinate with Matteo. Didn't have the time to get into that. And I guess my retrospective comment, which is on the previous slide, was that I didn't factor in the time that would go into the hierarchical brigade stuff. And that took out about 4 days or something like that, which I think would have helped complete a lot of these things. So that's it for me.
Okay, thanks, Happen. Matteo?
Okay, configuration management was something moved from the previous sprint. It's now finished, and I think we can close the epic too. In this sprint, we have imported the new config system in the login system. We are using it in all the synchronizer, in the synchronizer base, and we finally removed the old configuration module. So that one is done, and we are actually using only the new one. And that's it.
Thanks, Mateo. Andy and Zach.
Okay, yeah. So for this uniform development environments task, we had 19 story points accepted. We only actually checked off 5 of them, and there's a lot of them in progress right now. One reason why we didn't make a little bit more progress, well, I guess there's a number of reasons we listed. A bunch of bugs with 3.0 popped up mid-sprint, so that diverted some of my time and Zach's time. Was brigade work. People are on vacation. And also, I guess, we haven't done maybe a good job of separating out the dependencies between all of these tasks so that we can kind of work on things independently. So that's why a lot of things are in progress right now.
I'll just concur with that. There's a lot of things that are making a change to the development environment involves making changes in a lot of different places, and so when you want to do something that seems simple, it's you go down this rabbit hole, and it takes a while to get all that figured out, and that leads to these dependencies that sometimes are not obvious.
So Zach, since you're the only one who actually checked off any tasks as done, do you want to go ahead and talk about those?
Oh, the push of images is that's a pre-generation of images based on the tagging things so that they're with the Git repo commit. We're not currently doing it as in the 1403, doing it by versioning on like a major version number, but that's something we can figure out later. So I think we'll that's a pretty big step, because for especially some of the other environments, once we get builds for like the front end or mock environments, a lot of those will be able to be built without even pulling anything down. So that's a positive step. As Andy said, I think we're pretty close on a lot of these. It's sort of, we need to sort of get candidate implementations out there and let people try them and then iterate. So for the rest of the team, we're probably going to be asking you pretty soon to try this out and tell us how you like it.
Yep. So Zach talked about 1402, 1455. This was a bug that was introduced by some of the other refactoring that on a physical pod, rsync wasn't working anymore. That is fixed now. Changes in progress. So 1394 has to do with just having a single virtual machine that you bring up, regardless of whether you want to build a full pod or a cord in a box or a profile, do that in the same place. 1395 has to do with building the Onos apps without Gradle and without Java installed. I have a potential solution for that, and there's a patch set, but it's sort of waiting integration with the bigger picture before I can really consider that done. 1396, this is David Bainbridge's work. I don't know if he's on the call, but it's similar. So we're moving from Gradle to Mass, and so some of the Mass Docker images require Gradle to build right now, and so there's some work to be done to get rid of that Gradle dependency. That's also in flight. The master make file that drives building everything, I think there's been a number of people discussing the design and working on prototypes there. I know Zach has one that he's developed for OpenCloud, and I know that David and Sapin have been talking about this. So I think work is happening there. We just don't quite have the finished product yet. Like Zach said, we'll need to put together a prototype and get people's feedback. A couple tasks were not started. 1377 was mine. I intended to give a presentation on changes that we're planning on making to the build environment to XOS service developers. I did not have a chance to do that when I was in Menlo Park last week, but I hope that I can do that pretty soon, maybe over a Google Hangout if that's the only way we can do it, or the next time I'm in Menlo.
Andy, I think it would be good if you could do it early next sprint, just because we're in phase 3 of this, right? The uniform development environment. So it would be good if there's that feedback to see if anything needs to be modified before we close out this epic.
So your thinking is that this presentation is not informative so much as looking for feedback, and that may potentially change the direction of the refactoring work.
Yes, because part of it is these are the people that will be using this tool chain essentially, right? And so it'd be good for the folks to understand, see how it impacts their work, but also see if there is something that they're struggling with. I mean, the intent is not to have anything that completely changes it, but minor tweaks to make sure that maybe their workflow is understood and taken into account.
So I think that's the goal, and that was my understanding of this as well, was that it was a presentation to sort of here's what we have, and we've taken your feedback because we had a pretty extensive process of figuring out what requirements were. And then I guess this is sort of does this do what you want? And yes, it's different, but it does what you guys need from the build process. Is that correct?
Sure. Yeah, I think that sounds good. Maybe Zach, you and I can maybe discuss this offline. I have a little bit of a constraint in that next week I'm selling my house and moving to Arizona, so I don't know when I might get around to this particular task, but we will work something out.
Okay, that sounds fine. Let's just. I know I have some other stuff, so let's try to do that sooner rather than later.
Sounds good.
I think 1403 I already mentioned. That's on my plate. Figuring out how to do the major versioning is something we need to consider. What the source of versioning information is. So that's still outstanding. I think we're done with the slide.
Okay, thanks, Zach. Thanks, Andy. Okay, Matteo.
Okay, starting from the retrospective. This task was pushed by the configuration a bit forward, so I actually started it this week. And looking into it, it happens to me that we kind of underestimated it a bit. On the part of that, we are now exposing the Xproto source from XOS core, and we are reading that from the Tosca container. In preparation for this task, I moved with the help of Sapan the generative toolchain into a Python library so that it can be installed in different components. And I'm using that in Tosca. I started the generation of the Tosca definition from Xproto. It's still basic. I'm not considering the relations yet, but I'll start working on that next week. And so far, I was able to validate a really simple Tosca recipe against an auto-generated definition. what is missing here is to define how to authenticate users that push a request to the Tosca container, and to actually save the model that we define in Tosca.
Okay, thanks, Matteo. Deployments and build automation.
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I would say that the sprint was pretty good. Essentially, all the tasks are done, except that I have two things that are under review, so are not really done. But let's start from what's completely done. So the first one is SonarCube was an instance for Cord was created and installed, and it's working. Well, Zach at least has access to it. The Fabric setup, this was coming from the previous sprint, was completed, and so now we can, at the QCT pod, we can reprovision the Fabric every time we do a build. And then, as an extra little thing, we moved the automated build to QCT pod 1 from OL Lab, so we freed up the pod for the OLT work. Then I see now creation of jobs in SonarCube. This is something I guess Jack threw it in. I guess he can elaborate maybe more later on this. Then from my side, I did the new installation guide. Well, I feel the basic version is completed. I really like a review, possibly before 3.01 comes out. That would be nice. And then, oh yeah, this was supposed to be a big task. It lasted almost all the sprint. Move the automated build to use YAML configurations. So I was planning to commit this to Gerrit today because it's working now. But I thought that if then that gets merged, not all pods have their new YAML configuration already uploaded online. So this is really the trivial part. I just need half day, one day. I guess I'll do it on Monday to create all these pod configurations. And then I'll commit this to Gerrit. But I mean, the file is there, is working. It will need a review, of course. That's it on my side. I'm not sure if Zach wants to add something to the SonarCube jobs.
So this all was behind because I was out for a good portion of the sprint. But this is going to happen in the next week or so.
Okay. All right.
That's
it from my side.
I think I also I think I might need additional permission in Gerrit, but I'll let you know when that's
Sure.
if I do.
Just write me on Slack and we can figure that out. No problem.
Okay, thanks. Logging. I know Shivani is in Korea. So I think we're not quite sure what the state of this is.
Yeah, I don't have any news, but I think lately she has been working more on the on-site on gRPC to prepare the brigade meeting she was attending in Korea.
Okay, I think if you can follow up with her and see what that means in terms of this in Cord.
Okay.
Yeah, because we had some additional plans after this around errors and exceptions. And so we'll have to see if that needs to move out or gets reshuffled. And then the unit testing framework, I think we covered the Sonar Cube stuff under deployment and build automation, so we'll skip that. And then maintenance.
So here we had a bunch of bugs for the 3.0 release that were added mid-sprint. I think we sort of had a problem here that we had at the end of the last release cycle. We had this bug scrub sprint and documentation sprint that never fully happened because the release planning for 4.0 consumed a lot of time. And so we ended up releasing 3.0.0 with a fair amount of bugs. And significant time was spent trying to clean that up.
So just a comment here. So
yes.
Based upon this, do we need to look into doing release planning after the release is out?
I think my perspective is that it's really difficult to concentrate both on making sure we're delivering a good release for the current release and keeping track of all the complexity of planning the next release. It's hard to do that at the same time. So I would prefer to separate those two.
This is Larry. I agree. I forced the issue on, there were a lot of discussions going on, forced the issue, but I agree with Andy that we need to make sure we finish off one release before we get too involved in the next one. So I would argue we do postpone it. Lesson learned.
So I guess the 4.0 release planning or shared delusion release planning took maybe about 2 weeks. I don't know if that's typical. I think that maybe a week would be more typical if we just really had a week to focus exclusively on release planning. But if we could maybe set aside a week to do that after the release comes out, then that would be great.
Are we setting ourselves up to then have a release and then have bug fixes still during when we're doing that next release planning, or is it to just don't work on new features while we're doing release planning, and so that week becomes bug fix / release planning?
Well, so the last sprint of the release cycle should be bug fixing and documentation. So if we're then doing a lot of bug fixing during the release planning week, then we did something wrong, I guess.
So I think there's another factor, which was there was still a lot of merging and integration going on during that last sprint. So we were doing 3 things simultaneously.
Yeah, it was kind of feature freeze in air quotes. There were still things in flight then.
And I think what I'm hearing though is we really need to do a few things, right? Integration has to happen by feature complete. Anything that isn't merged should not be in the release because we'll head a support branch or support branches, and then at that point we'll focus on making sure that bug fixes get on those branches and bug fixes only. And so I think if we move towards more of that kind of cadence and making sure that we're holding to those requirements, we would be able to do more solid release, right? So if we're okay with this, I think the plan is let's focus on making sure that feature complete is honored. We focus on hardening sprint to cover bug fixes and documentation. And the focus of that sprint will be making sure that we have a solid release, and then we can do release planning after the release is out.
That works for me.
Okay, I've made note of it, so we'll consider that planned then.
Andy, sorry, just one thing. I'd like, even because I think it's almost completed, I'd like to make sure we can make the Calyx pod work. I think it's a priority just because it's one of the very few pods that we have with a fabric. And so, you know, now we have 4 pods at QCT, but in reality, just one of them is a full pod.
So I guess you're suggesting that this should be a priority for the next sprint, that we get that working.
Well, I mean, guys, it depends by you, right? If you want to have, if you're fine with what you have today and not having another pod with hardware, with the fabric, I mean, sounds good to me. But if you know that when we get at the end of the release, you'll need another pod because you need to start testing stuff and so on, which seemed the case even before, then it's better we think about that. And by the way, as far as I know, you had already possibly the fix in place. So it might not be at this point such a big job, assuming we don't lose the VPN connectivity again and so on. So I can take care of that part, but I would need you for the code fix.
Yeah, so maybe, Luca, you and I should discuss this more offline. It looks to me like the Calyx pod has taken a step back in terms of it's not even making it, the install is not even making it to the point where it used to fail before. So I think there's something basically wrong with that needs to be resolved.
Let's take it offline.
Yeah.
Let's take it offline.
Okay.
Simply a note went bad. Assume I fix it. Okay. On Monday you find it fixed. So I just want to make sure this is not the plan, it's the sprint review, but we started to discuss about these issues. So I'm just saying, I guess it would be nice, assuming we want to have resources by the end of the sprint, like another pod to be used, that we allocate the time in the next sprint to fix also this issue. I know it's distracting, as you guys prefer. So I think you will need that resource by the end of the release, which is not that far, as it seems.
Right. So you're right that I prepared a patch set that I think works around the strange problem we're seeing there. And I'm happy to test it on that pod once it gets to the point where
okay, cool. I'll work on that.
Okay.
That will be on me.
Okay, that sounds great.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so back to the maintenance. So there was a bunch of documentation updates, inaccuracies in the 3.0 documentation that I fixed with the help of Ping and Paul Ward at Windstream and a bunch of other people who went through the process and found things that were broken and let us know. So that's great. There was an issue with the core generate tool producing an incorrect output for the fabric. Oh, I'm sorry, was there I thought I heard a question. No, okay. The core generate tool produced incorrect output, so David Bainbridge fixed that. Let's see, I don't know anything about 1464.
So that one was discovered during the OPNFV demo, and that was just the XOS UI container spewing out some error messages that really didn't mean anything, yet looked like things were broken, so they were cleaned up.
Okay, great. 1474 is an issue that was with master, just a bug that occurred from the some of the build environment refactoring. And then, yeah, go ahead.
I addressed, or I helped out with 1474 and 1441, both of which were, I don't know, I think I could characterize those as problems with our testing environment, because our testing environment sometimes didn't match up physical. And so if it didn't match up the physical environment, we'd have builds that would run in passive flying colors, and then they'd get to the physical pod and they would fail. So I don't know whether this is we need to look at how we test or what exactly, but it's something that's worth considering.
By testing environment, I think you're referring to cord in a box and differences between cord in a box and a physical pod install. Yeah, we've made an effort to try to reduce those differences over time, but you're exactly right that sometimes there's still differences between these environments that come up and bite us. So we should be aware of that and try to figure out how to continue to remove the differences. So a couple of things in progress. 1390 is Luca's refactor of the physical pod installation guide. Yeah, I heard your request that we get that nailed down before we release 3.0.1, so that can be part of that release. I'll try to take a look at that as soon as I can.
Consider that as a source. I took anyway the latest version that you guys updated recently, right? So all your fixes are already there. We just added something more. Anyway,
perfect.
If anyone has a chance, please, that would be great.
Okay, sounds good. 3.0.1 release should be cut pretty soon. I think we have all of the changes that we were waiting for 3.0.1, with the exception of the ONOS update. So I haven't checked my Slack recently. I might have more information about that, but I think that's the only piece, updating ONOS to 1.8.9.
Yeah, so the build is done. I think we just need to verify that everything was okay with the QA run from last night.
Okay, so you'll let me know when that looks good.
Yep.
Okay. And then a number of bugs were not started. Actually, one of these looks like it's listed twice.
Yeah, so I can fill in details on those two. 1459 came up during the OPNFV demo, and it was, we noticed if you do a Docker compose down, it destroys the database container and loses the handle on where the database was volume mounted. And the issue is that we mount the database to kind of an anonymous location rather than mounting it to a specific location in the file system. I kind of flagged that one as a high priority, but we didn't get to it just high priority because it blew up a demo. The other one, 1465, might actually be done. I didn't notice it because it was listed down there as unassigned. So I will qualify that and see if that one is actually done and fixed, and if so, I can mark it complete.
Thanks, Zach. Scott. Okay.
Just
So on to OpenCloud.
So I got a bunch of stuff that's been a backlog probably since Dangerous Edition through. So 9.12, which does a bunch of things to provide OpenCloud support to platform install, and it grouped a bunch of roles to prep for the make-based install. 1091 is centralized cord artifact builds. That actually is probably a dupe with the upload Docker containers to Docker Hub, but it varies very slightly. That basically is to also add a component to not build containers in a way that made them so that you couldn't put them on multiple systems. So it was a separation of the build. So when you run a build process, it would be specific to one pod that would genericize it to work on multiple pods. Another thing that was completed was 1151, which is paths defined per group and playbooks. That was somewhat problematic because that actually caused the 14 errors that Andy ran into. But that was one of those situations where it worked fine in virtual, but not in physical. The to-do, this is Scott's item, 1372. That's the rework of the CDN synchronizer and service. That's going to come up in next sprint.
Okay.
I think that's it.
Thanks, Zach.
Oh, well, retrospective comment. A lot of things were build refactor dependent, and that is still taking longer than expected and delayed, so this gets delayed.
Okay.
That's it.
QA.
Okay. Hello?
We're using this mic, right?
Okay. So for QA, what we have done is, basically these two tickets are talking about to dynamically generate some of the input files for our tests based on different profiles loaded. And to add functional tests like VSG or VTN for physical part is still in progress. I think it was blocked by some bugs in the physical environment. And the other two water-related tests, I think might have been done, but I was not able to get confirmation from the Redsys team, so I just marked them as still in progress. The gRPC API tests is not started yet, so the retrospective comment is some of us was blocked by bugs, and actually all of us are on vacations in the spring. Okay, that's it.
Okay, thanks. Fabric?
We're still working on dual homing. The host detection and failover part are almost done, and I'm writing and running more tests on it. And also, Saurav, I'm not sure if he's here. He's still working on the route populating part of dual homing. And also, we are also working on the GCP relay. We designed a new mechanism to support both direct and indirect attached hosts. And the implementation is work in progress. EE is working on it. And in this sprint, I spent some time working on the unit test for host handler in SAM routing, and also spent some time writing a paper about Trellis. So that's our part of retrospective comment. And Jonah, do you want to update?
Yeah, I finished off the task to add key lives to the IFM protocol between Quagga and ONOS, so that we can detect when the Quagga router fails and fail over to the backup. So that involved a patch to Quagga and a patch to ONOS, but that's done now.
Okay, thanks, Charles and Jenna. Ecord?
That's me. So I did some work on remodeling and rethinking the Tosca models and Exportal then for the global XOS service that we need. This is also in the discussions that we are having with other teams inside the core projects such as MCore that probably will need global XOS. In the testing phase, it's a synchronizer that's giving me problems to some import related things. And as said, the testing is low because it's hard to debug and stuff like that. And not written here, but I managed to get it partially done. It's in testing progress. That too is onboarding applications, a new application that we need for the global eCord through Tosca model. that's kind of it on my side. I know Francesco worked on the Onos applications that I will be onboarding through these Tosca models to get the end-to-end networking aspect done and registering the local Onoses as big switches. And then I know Mark has probably some updates on China Mobile. Otherwise, that's it on my side.
Yeah, Marcus disappeared.
Perfect. Then I know that they are working through issues of like being in China, meaning that they're blocked by the Great Firewall of China, and getting all the bits and pieces that we need for Cord has been a hassle, and he enlisted multiple people's help. They're getting closer to getting it done, and I don't know much more than this.
Okay, thanks, Andrea. Ping Ping?
So for the coding box, we don't need to run the RCode anymore. We just directly run the mcode profile and set up the mcode development environment. And so this sprint, we roughly move the 4 existing services that 3 of them will be finished out to the 3.0. And only one, the BBU service, there are lots of legacy code that we need to further clean it up to finish the testing on 3.0. For the breakdown rate, at the beginning we try to let the service both work on 3.0 and master, and we found there are some differences. We need more work to write on master. So I think since the September demo is coming, so we just give the master low priority since we will going to use 3.0 for September demo. So we will focus all the work on the 3.0. And from this week, from this Monday, we started the MCOD sprint planning separately. We have a lot of other work except the task reported here. If you are interested, you can open the MCOD board in the Jira, like a link aggregation X1, the performance testing for the MCOD release, all happen on the MCOD board. That's all for here.
Okay, so Ping Ping, are you saying that MCORD will be handled in a separate sprint planning and review session?
Yeah, we had been doing this like for MWC time, and just we stopped 2 months because we are planning the new stories for the next milestone. So we continue our sprint planning. Because there are a lot of other MCOD works like the link aggregation, the X1. There maybe I truly share too much information about that only MCOD relative event in this meeting, I think. So we set up the separate sprint meeting.
Okay, so your plan is to not provide MCORD updates in this sprint.
I only report the XYZ or code relative tasks that we progress here.
Okay. Thanks, Ping Ping. Okay, so Shared Delusion Sprint 2. I think I'll go over to the core sprint planning, just a quick recap of where we're at with the various updates. This is kind of pulling it up a little bit. Relative to what was planned. So as we look at the sprint planning, in Sprint 2, there were a few things planned, and I guess some unplanned stuff, right? So the Tosca engine rewrite work has moved to Sprint 3. There was an ask to update the software and processes document. I actually didn't see an update on that, so I assume folks may not have a chance to do that. I actually also want to point out that we probably shouldn't have taken this work in Sprint 2 because we had gone through sprint planning and it wasn't called out at that point. So if it hasn't been done, I think we officially move it to Sprint 3 since that was what we should have done to begin with, so as not to impact Sprint 2 deliverables.
When that's a software practices document.
Yes.
I actually moved it to the wiki. I tied up a few loose ends so that there was no incorrect information in it. mostly replaced the missing stuff with pointers to other pages that effectively answered the question. It's a document that can always be improved, but there was just too much valuable information in it to leave it idling for too long. But it is one that we can come back to.
Okay. And then for QA, there was Sonar Cube, which has moved out to Sprint 3. I think will be done in early Sprint 3. And then on the open cloud side, the CDN stuff will be moving out to Sprint 3. What that does is, of course, this is kind of a cascading thing, right? So this implies that service tenancy model will be complete in Sprint 4. This pushes out elimination of the XOS UI container, except for the V10 work, Jono, which we have you listed for Sprint 3. And that should still be okay in terms of dependencies. Okay, so you'll be able to do that in the next sprint. The thing I wanted to verify is, so there were plans from the Fabric to integrate 1.10 for ONOS. Is that still in plan?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, if you guys can confirm and make sure it's there as part of sprint planning, because there is an item on the XOS side to update the Fabric configuration to support that.
Yeah, and also some documentation is required. Okay, I'll keep that in mind.
Okay. And then just a quick note then. We've done some slight shuffling. So this was original plan. This is some of the slight shuffling to get us into the next sprint, right? Some things have shuffled out. CDN will take part of that, which moves service tenancy, which then pushes into sprint 4. Task engine rewrite, Sonar Cube got moved over. The good news is we're still on track for the uniform development environment as we head into sprint 3, since that would be the last phase of it. I think some gotchas here are there were questions around what Varun, I think, is working on. There were initial plans to have Varun support Mateo for the Task engine work. And then Shivani was logging, and so we need to figure out where this is at because this impacts accession and error handling. But we're still on plan for the VTN. And then we're working through Sprint 4 and Sprint 5, Sprint 6 impact. And then I've noted, as we were discussing during the TST calls, so possible 3.x build in Sprint 4 to integrate eCord and ACORD. And then the note here is that there would need to be documentation for the APIs provided by the end of July so that the various services can determine the impact to them. And then a note in Sprint 5 that there is possible Volta integration based upon their August 15th release. Okay, and then just some notes here. I think I've noted a red item, break hard-coded services dependency, because we moved to eliminate XOS UI container. I think what we need to take a look at is there's synchronizer work going on, which is actually the lowest priority item we have that is starting in Sprint 3. But this may be at risk, and it's much higher on our priority list if you refer back to slide 7. Right, so synchronizers down here. And then we have eliminate hard-coded services dependencies too. So I think there needs to be kind of a quick sync by the team to see if it makes sense maybe for someone else to pick this up before we start the synchronizer refactoring work. Because as things slip out, does it mean we should really move out the synchronizer refactoring work altogether and focus on making sure the higher priority items are being addressed?
Yeah, so, I think the hard-coded service dependencies, that's more important than the implementation refactor, just because the service dependencies are going to impact all of eCord, mCord, all of those guys really want those hard-coded service dependencies eliminated.
So instead of doing categorize and unify synchronizers, can Sapin focus on that instead?
Yeah, I mean, I'll assign myself to whatever we collectively decide is the highest priority item. My feeling is that the synchronizer refactoring task itself breaks up into multiple tasks where there's a service.
I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to interrupt you because we have the ONOS review session. So can the team take this offline?
Yeah.
And then let's figure this out for the sprint planning session on Monday. So the next thing I want to bring up then for the sprint planning is it'll be next Monday. We are looking at 2 p.m. I will be on PTO, so Mateo said he will be hosting. So let's get that worked out. The other thing I wanted to get a handle on is we are doing separate sprints in JIRA to support the various brigades. So I know there's a container brigade that Bainbridge is starting up performance. Hierarchical, was there anything else? I will add these into JIRA as separate sprints so that the brigade leads will be able to start putting their stories into those. I'm not missing anything, right? Okay, I'll just do those 3, and then if I'm missing anything, please ping me before noon today. Okay, thanks everyone, and sprint planning on Monday, so please work through some of the platform requirement details, and then pull that into the sprint planning session. Thanks. Okay, bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.